Cancel your vacation, Trump DOJ. Get ready for aggressive, expedited discovery on the issues that you don't want to talk about disappearing migrants from the United States to essentially extermination camps in El Salvador. A federal judge essentially used those words and said, I don't care, Donald, about press releases or what Bukele said in the Oval Office. I know what the word facilitate means. I know what the Supreme Court ruled. Trump regime, you are losers. You lost the case. Stop pretending that you won. The issue now that you lost becomes the remedy. And the remedy is clear. Facilitate the return. Now, what steps you're taking to facilitate, I'm going to make sure that every single day for the next 2 weeks, we get to the bottom of it. Because clearly, if the United States wanted, in a partnership with Bukele, to secure the return of migrants that's disappearing, it could pretty much do that pretty easily. We also know, Harry, and I think this will be a subject of what we're about to talk about too, that El Salvador has sent back migrants to the U.S. before, who they say don't belong. Maybe people who are not from El Salvador, or people who they didn't want back, or women. There have been a class of about 15 to 20 people or so who have already been sent to El Salvador, and El Salvador and the United States have facilitated the return of those individuals pursuant to other immigration decrees and other issues. That happens. So why are you not doing it here? What's happening specifically here? Now, when we talk about Abrego Garcia, what I don't want to be lost in this discussion is that he's never been convicted of a crime. He's been here since he's 16 years old, never convicted of a crime. He's here, or was here, lawfully based on a 2019 order by an immigration judge when Trump 1 was in office. So if y'all believe this was the MS-13 ringleader, you'd probably want to impose a remedy more than, hey, just check in once a week with the ICE office or once a month. Let them know your status. This is an individual who was living in Maryland, married to a U.S. citizen. He has 3 children who are U.S. citizens, working in Maryland and just checking back into an ICE detention center when they picked him out as someone who would go to the El Salvador camps. Now, America also has extradition processes as well, where in the past, whether it was someone like a Pablo Escobar or a El Chapo, the worst of the worst, right? There would be a process where we would normally say, hey, it's probably better that the big gang leaders go through a process in the U.S. because our prison system was always more secure. There's a process. There was a way of doing it. So to the extent you believe he's an MS-13 leader, you bring him back, give him the process that he was entitled to, and then you can make a determination once the facts are out there. Is this going to be a deportation? Where do you go? How does that handle? But what the judge wants to do now, Harry, is just get to the bottom of who knew what when, what steps are you taking? And I think what this judge is doing in ordering this discovery, and she goes, I'll open up my courtroom for it. I don't want to hear about your vacations or your weekends. It doesn't matter. You're doing this right now. We're doing it here in the courtroom if we have to. I think she wants to build the record so that she knows this is going to go back to the Supreme Court. I think she wants this to be bulletproof. And I think she wants to expose with the record, not based on press release or conjecture. These are the violations. Here's what's not happening. She wants to make sure that her record is protected. The truth is there when this gets delivered back to Chief Justice John Roberts and the Supreme Court. What do you make of this order on discovery in this case? And do you think we're going to see this, Harry, in other cases? We are seeing it in other cases too, but this style.
Yeah. I agree basically with everything you said, Ben, and a couple points just to add. She came out loaded for bear. She had thought it through, and she engaged very little. The DOJ lawyer tried to mount some arguments. She was like, no, we're not talking about that anymore. We are on remedy, and we are on discovery. And it really brought home to me when he proffered, they put this both in their papers and proffered in front of hers. Well, we already know El Salvador has said we won't return him. And she said, I want to proceed by the rules of civil procedure. I want declarations. I want depositions. She understood, in other words, as I think most of us did, that was a total contrived set piece yesterday for them to be able to say, well, there's nothing to be done. The other point that you raised, I think, about extradition treaties and the like is just a really good one. The claim that the U.S. is trying to make. And this was brought up with facilitate, and they've taken this just counter to logic kind of explanation that if you have to move your little finger with respect to a foreign country, you are now, as a judge, weeding in foreign policy. But as you say, all the time we have these orders, and remember what's going on here. It's a constitutional violation. And now the question is how to remedy it. Let's say the guy was in France and we had to go get him, but you got a visa for it. Well, that would be dealing with a foreign government. Their line, in other words, that you can't take 1/2 inch step toward anything that deals with a foreign government, I think just doesn't hold up. Now, it does seem to me they're going to try to adhere to it. He actually, did the DOJ lawyer, try to sort of rattle sabers, I thought, about an appeal that they would bring. And she was like, appeal? There's no appeal. We are doing discovery. And she really, the orders are all from before. She takes the Supreme Court as having affirmed her, which they have. One of the most, tawdry and dishonest points yesterday was Stephen Miller and Donald Trump trying to say they won at the Supreme Court 9-0. There's nothing to be done now. I'm ordering discovery. You've lost all those other things. So what are they going to do? Are they going to take an emergency order saying, you can't have discovery? There will certainly come some conflicts during discovery when they refuse to produce someone, or they say, I won't answer that, and there really won't be a good reason. Could they gin that up for an appeal? In general, at this point, we're doing workaday discovery over 2 weeks, and they've got to submit to it. And it is, as you say, what it's going to show, very different from some momentous issue, foreign policy, we're ordering you to go to war or whatever. It's going to show, unless they completely lie, there's this contract. We made it with El Salvador. They welcome it. We're paying them a lot of money. No one has tried in any sincerity to get Abrego Garcia back because, as you say, we've got instances where they've done it before. It would be child's play. And so, they're trying to resist giving any facts at all and hide behind a so-called foreign policy shield that just doesn't exist. There are many cases. I've kind of been reading up on them the last couple of days. Just think about the Guantanamo cases in the wake of 9/11, where, the Supreme Court said, no, look, you've got to give some ground here. You can't just say national security and zip it completely. So Zinnis is totally ready, is probably going to deny their claims. They're going to try to stall. They're going to make it more than 2 weeks if they can, and they're going to look for some opportunity for an emergency appeal. But I'll tell you what it's going to come down to workaday issues of, may you order a declaration, or do they have to reserve a claim of privilege? And I think the Fourth Circuit will just give that short shrift. No, do the discovery first. And the Supreme Court might not even take it. So there's reason for concern that when it goes all the way up, depending on how they frame the record, the court might be more solicitous than they were last Thursday, saying you cannot, you need to facilitate his return. You do have to worry about that. But I think between now and then, gathering facts and pushing through their resistance, I think she's really well armed. And if they try to mess with her, the higher courts will have her back. That's my read.
No, I think about the case you mentioned, enemy combatants.
Rassel v. Bush, for example. Yeah.
Hamdi v. Rumsfeld, and these questions were addressed where actual 9/11 conspirators, people who are involved, being held indefinitely as enemy combatants based on a declaration of an executive, where the Supreme Court had a very dim view of that and believed that the Supreme Court and courts can intervene and say, executive branch, you can't do that. So here we're dealing, though, with literally a guy who was living in Maryland, who is checking in once a month to the ICE detention, who had an American wife, who had 3 American kids, who was working, who then was tagged with "you're a terrorist now" based on an emergency war declaration by Trump. You're a terrorist. You don't get to prove it. You don't get to put evidence. You don't get to say I'm not a terrorist. You don't get to have lawyers. You don't get to do any of that. And then you get put in an extermination camp in El Salvador.
Just to cut to the chase, and in the 9/11 cases, they were saying we really ought to be able to make our claim. Here, there is a demonstrable and already found constitutional violation. The Supreme Court has upheld that. He should be now dealt with just as if he'd never gone down there, and they must facilitate his release from custody. That's a remedy. You don't say that unless you found it. So it's, in that sense, way stronger than what happened in 2004, where they wanted to at least, stake their claim. This guy has been ultimately screwed. And for the administration to say, well, now we're doing foreign policy after we deposited him in El Salvador, it shouldn't fly. And I think it will not fly.
Well, there you have it. Discovery. We will keep everybody posted.
Yeah.
We will keep everybody posted on the developments. Harry Litman, Talking Feds YouTube, Talking Feds Substack, the Talking Feds podcast. It's where I get my legal news from. Everybody subscribe to all of those. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Ben.
Love this video? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch and help us blow past 1 million followers.